I had a thought in that scene where she's like father and Daemon could be like brother. And it's like, how often does a married couple be like
My
father
brother.
and brother?
And my brother.
Yeah, a little weird. Again, gonna ignore it because I don't want to think about it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bookdown Fantasy Podcast. We, Addison and Lorraine, are two best friends who love to explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today, we are covering House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 8. This episode's docket will include contesting of Driftmark's heir and a beheading. So, let's get into it. As of today, when we were recording, we'll be down to just 12 days until the premiere of Season 2. Crazy.
Yeah.
As a quick reminder, we will be discussing everything from the first season of House of the Dragon Season 1, and we may point to other events that happen in other episodes as well. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have explicit conversations. Explicit language may be used and triggering events may be discussed, so please adjust accordingly. As far as housekeeping updates go, we are continuing with our Crown of Midnight episodes. So far, we have released 2 episodes for that, covering chapters 1 through 13. So if you have been reading along with us, go check those out. Or if you are looking to start a new series, then Throne of Glass is what we recommend. That's all for housekeeping, and this is what you can expect from today's House of the Dragon episode. First, we will start with the State of the Realm, where we recap key events. Next, we will hold a meeting with the King's Council to analyze key events and conversations. After that, we will continue with our trial in the Fantasy Court of Law to decide which team has enough evidence to support their claim to the Iron Throne. And last but not least, we will also share our favorite moments from the episode. And without further ado, Addison, please update us with the State of the Realm.
Of course. Time jump alert. We start this episode and we've jumped through time roughly 6 years. Rhaenys is in the Hall of Nine with Baela and Vaemond, receiving news from the Maester about Lord Corlys. He has been away for 6 years, once again battling the Triarchy and the Stepstones. During an ambush, he was slashed on the neck by a dagger and now stands on the precipice of death. His unknown future sets forth the dominoes that begin to fall in this episode. If Lord Corlys dies, Driftmark will pass to Viserys Velaryon. At least it should. But not if Vaemond, Lord Corlys' brother, has something to say about it. And believe me, he has a lot to say about it, and he says it loudly. Meanwhile, Shadow Daddy Daemon is on Dragonstone hunting for dragon eggs. While out, he receives a missive regarding Vaemond's request to contest the passing of Driftmark to Viserys. He informs a pregnant Rhaenyra, and they decide they must go to King's Landing to petition for Viserys to remain the rightful heir to Driftmark. Team Black arrives in King's Landing in full force, but are snubbed when they are greeted only by Lord Caswell. Alicent, Otto, and the rest of the King's Council discuss the situation regarding the Driftmark ascension, and it's clear that Team Green wishes to weaken Rhaenyra and give the Driftmark throne to Vaemond. As Alicent leaves the council meeting, she is informed that she is needed to handle a delicate matter regarding Prince Aegon. We know that can only mean trouble. Rhaenyra and Daemon visit a bedridden Viserys and try to convey the importance of the situation. Viserys is unable to really comprehend because of the constant IV of painkillers he's getting. In a heartwarming moment, Rhaenyra introduces him and her 2 newest sons, Aegon and Viserys. The delicate situation is a young woman who has been sexually assaulted by Aegon. Based on Alicent's reaction, we get the distinct impression that this is not the first time she's had to have this conversation. Alicent, while sympathetic, does her duty and essentially pays the girl off to keep quiet and gives her a special tea to rid her of any unwanted consequences. A seething Alicent then confronts Aegon. Aegon brushes off the accusation and Alicent responds with a slap at an insult. To be honest, can't say we blame her. Alicent goes to read Daemon and Rhaenyra, and you could cut the tension with a knife. Meanwhile, Jace and Luke go to the training yard where they see Aemon displaying impressive skills against Kristen Cole, while Rhaenys is in the Godswood. Rhaenyra comes to make a deal. Betroth Jace and Luke to Baela and Rhaena in exchange for her support of Viserys' claim to Driftmark. Later that night, Rhaenyra pays a visit to Viserys and begs for his aid, citing if she is to bear the weight of the responsibility of the Iron Throne, she needs her father's help. Rhaenyra's plea does not fall on deaf ears, and just as the petitions for Driftmark begin, Viserys makes his entrance. He will sit the throne today. Viserys all but outright dismisses Daemon and reminds everyone that this succession was set long ago. He calls upon Rhaenys to confirm Corlys's wishes, and she does so, also publicly announcing the betrothal between Baela, Rhaena, Jace, and Luke. This does not sit well with Daemon, and he goes nuclear. It starts with him talking shit to the king and ends with him screaming at Rhaenyra's children that they are bastards. We can only assume he would have continued his tirade, but Daemon removes his head from his shoulders before he can continue. Later that evening, it's time for the family dinner, where not just food is served, but heartfelt toasts, insults, and, in the end, physical blows. The dinner starts off well, and for a fleeting moment, you think everything just might be okay. But that all changes when Aemon gives a strongly worded toast. Ha! See what I did there? I was like, I'm so clever. Okay. Our final scene of this episode is also Viserys's. The king thinks he's speaking to Rhaenyra, but in reality is speaking to Alicent. In a confusing set of final words, Alicent thinks the king wishes for Aegon to be heir, but passes away before he can clarify what he truly meant.
Damn it, Viserys.
Fucking Viserys. Oh, God.
Just when he was like, oh, yes, he came back and then he dies.
You're like, no, please, no. Yeah.
It was going to happen.
I know.
All right. Thank you for the update, Addison. Obviously, we know there's a lot of stuff to discuss, a lot of dialogue in this episode. So on to the King's Council we go.
As always, we begin our King's Council analyzing the title of the episode. The title of this episode is The Lord of the Tides. There's not a ton of analysis here. It's pretty explicit in what it's in reference to. The main conflict in this episode is the ascension of the throne of Driftmark, which is kind of hilarious when you think about it, because this entire conversation is predicated on a major what-if scenario. If Corlys dies, what will happen? And plot twist, he doesn't die. So
that's true.
All of this was for nothing. A lot of drama, a lot of tension, and ultimately Daemon's death for a potential futuristic situation that never comes to pass anyways. But the Lord of the Tides, obviously, is currently Lord Corlys. He sits on the Driftmark throne. He rules Driftmark. And that is the main conflict of this episode. Also important to note, as a disclaimer for this episode, there is yet another time jump. It's roughly 6 years. Several of the characters have been aged up. Jace, Luke, Aemond and Aegon, as well as, I think, Baela and Rhaena. The opening scene of this episode takes place in the Hall of Nine. Rhaenys is there, Baela is there, as well as Aemond. And a maester is talking to them and discussing the situation with Lord Corlys. We learned that there was a resurgence with the Triarchy and that Lord Corlys takes his fleet of ships and is battling the Triarchy there. And unknowingly leads his men into an ambush. There's an abandoned ship, and in reality, it was loaded with Triarchy soldiers. During the battle, Lord Corlys is slashed in the neck with a dagger, and he falls overboard into the sea. While the cut was severe, it does not kill him. Instead, the major concern is that he has an infection. I believe the maester's words were, he burns from within. So very, very iffy on whether Corlys can actually survive this illness. Obviously, medical technology and innovation wasn't really a thing. People died from really common infections, and this one seems pretty severe. This sets into motion the rest of the events for this episode. It is presumed that Corlys will not survive, and so it's vitally important that the ascension is settled. Promptly after the maester leaves, Daemon approaches Rhaenys and basically starts talking shit. And he's like, we need to face the reality of who's going to ascend. Rhaenys tries to push him off by saying, Corlys is not even dead yet. Why are we acting as if he's already dead and gone? But Daemon is very pushy. He really wants this settled, and obviously he wants it settled in his favor. So Daemon believes that the Driftmark throne should pass to him because he's really the only true Valyrian left besides Corlys. Laena is dead. Laenor is quote-unquote dead. There is Laena's children, but Laenor's children are not really his children. So Corlys says something to the effect of, I am the I and the sneeze snakes. Oh my God. Sneeze snakes. Okay.
You're going to keep saying that now. I can already feel it.
I am. God damn it. Sneeze snakes. All right. Just if I say that, I'm just going to keep going. Okay. He says, I am the sea snake's own blood, the closest relation he has left. Bernice warns him to be careful and that he is flirting with treason. And he says, I speak the truth and you know it. My brother cares only for the history books, but what about the Velaryon line? And this conversation really sets the tone for the rest of Vaemon's character. He cares very, very deeply about bloodlines, whereas we know Lord Corlys does not. Remember his kind of famous quote at the end of last episode, history doesn't remember blood, it only remembers names. So everyone in the room knows that Rhaenyra's children are bastards, right? Everyone knows that. Everyone is okay with ignoring it. They've made their peace with it for whatever reason, but that doesn't sit well with Vaemon. Daemon says that Driftmark should be his, and ultimately, he doesn't need her support, that he will take the Driftmark throne by force if necessary, and even goes so far as to vaguely threaten her and says that the crown, aka Alicent Otto Hightower, have good reason to take his side. Rhaenys says, the king would have your tongue for this, and Vaemon comes back with like a chef's kiss line. He says, but it's not a king who sits the throne, it's a queen. And I was like,
that's
damn.
Exactly, that was exactly the quote that I was like, that one was major for him because he ain't wrong. Obviously, we see that Viserys is on his final days, and Alicent and Greens have been running the show for many years at this point.
Oh, yeah. That is one thing that I both love and hate about Vaemon's character. It is so ingrained in him. It is part of his core that he has to speak the truth no matter the consequences. Like, consequences be damned. If it's the truth as he knows it, he is going to say it. And we will revisit this theme a little bit later in the episode because it definitely comes up in a big way.
Well, he's so adamant that we're like, Daemon, you're not going to get away with saying this, right? Everybody has learned to play the game, but Vaemon's like, no, I'm right. And therefore, the truth's going to be the reality. And we're like, that's not how this works. You're dealing with a bunch of politicians, essentially. So
yeah, it was a nice try, but
didn't work out.
No. Promptly after that scene, we move to Dragonstone, where we see Daemon, and he's going on a little nature walk, and he goes into this
nature walk,
yeah. Nature walk, Nature walk. And he goes into this crevice, and honestly, this scene kind of gave me the ick. He's digging around in this heaping pile of steaming egg sack, and it's kind of gooey, and
I think it was more the sounds. Like visually, it wouldn't have mattered, but it's the sound. It's like the squishy, oh God, yeah, I agree. It was not pleasant to listen to.
It did not make good ASMR. It did not.
Absolutely not.
So he takes his little pickaxe and he pulls out a dragon egg. He leaves the crevice and he's talking to, I call them the Dragon Masters. I don't know what their actual titles are, but it's the same people we see in the dragon pit helping the children train with their dragons so that they work with the dragons. And he tells them excitedly that Syrinx has had another clutch of eggs and has produced 3 eggs. So he takes the eggs, gives them to them, and tells them to go put them in the warmers, whatever, to keep them warm.
To incubate them.
To incubate them, yes, thank you. And he gets a message from Baela and Driftmark. We see Daemon open the message, but we don't know what it's about. The next scene we cut to is in the Great Hall of Dragonstone. We see Jace is practicing his Velaryon with a maester, and he's very, very dedicated. You can tell that he is really passionate about it, and he's trying really, really hard. And I don't know why, but I really like that. You get just these tiny insights into Jace and Luke's character as they've developed into adults. And you can tell that they're just such good people. They're such good boys. They care very deeply. They're very respectful and polite. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later in the family dinner scene at the end of the episode.
Well, it's like such a stark contrast to how Aegon is, for example. And Aemon's the
Yes.
same way, but Aemond has obviously a very vicious streak too, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like with Rhaenyra's kids, they are all truly really good friends with each other. They care about each other, and they
Yes.
all are very supportive of each other as well. So
There's a very deep-rooted sense of camaraderie between Rhaenyra's children
mhm,
versus the comparison between Aegon, Aemond, Helena,
mhm,
etc.
yeah,
And I think that's evident in a lot of scenes in this episode specifically.
mhm,
So Jace is struggling a little bit with the Velaryon, and Rhaenyra comes in and she sort of teases him and says, I think you've done enough for today. And she doesn't expect him to learn it in a whole day. And he says, a king should honor the traditions of his forebears. And I thought that was also really indicative of his character, that he feels this sense of honor and respect for those that came before him. And that is clearly not something we see presented in Aegon. Aegon
mhm.
has no respect for his position, the sanctity of what it means to be the heir to the Iron Throne. I think Aemond is a little bit better about that. Maybe not in the same way that Jace is, but it's just such a juxtaposition between Jace and Aegon.
Yes, totally agree.
Daemon comes in and Rhaenyra tells the children to leave, and you get to see little Joffrey, and he's grown up quite a bit. He's very, very cute. Also looks a lot like Harwin Strong.
I was gonna say he looks very similar to Luke. The casting
Yes,
for Joffrey and Luke, I was like, are they brothers in real life? I didn't look this up, but they look particularly similar.
they really do. Yeah, I agree. They did a good job casting all three of them, I think.
hmm
Yeah. So Daemon comes in and he relays the message he received from Baela to Rhaenyra. Daemon is challenging for Driftmark based on legitimacy. He has gone to King's Landing to petition the king, aka Alicent Hightower. And they have this exchange where they're very concerned about how Rhaenys is going to play into this conversation. On the one hand, Rhaenys is married to Corlys. Corlys has made it pretty clear he wants Viserys to ascend. But Rhaenys thinks that Daemon and Rhaenyra were directly responsible for Laenor's death, that they had him killed. And so Rhaenyra is concerned that she would not support Lucerys' claim because she hates Daemon and Rhaenyra, which I can't really say I blame Rhaenys for having that thought, because in a way she is correct, minus the fact that, of course, Laenor isn't actually dead and it's what Laenor wanted. But from her perspective, shit, I would believe that too, you know?
Right,
So,
right. Exactly.
but Daemon says that Rhaenys clearly doesn't hate them that much because she still took Baela to ward, which Baela is Daemon's daughter, Daemon and Laena's, but still. And ultimately, they decide that they need to go to King's Landing because they have to answer this petition and fight for Lucerys' claim to the throne. Also, randomly important to note in this scene, Rhaenyra is with child. So, which
That's important for later episodes. Well,
yes,
the last final two.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. But just important to note because obviously that means a baby's on the way. And we know how birthing scenes go in this show. Team Black arrives at King's Landing in full force, and they are greeted by Lord Caswell, which, who the fuck is that? I don't know who he is. I don't remember
I had
him.
no idea. But clearly he's not super important because, as we know from what Hightower says later, he's like a greeting that befits their status or something stupid like that. And
yes,
they weren't really greeted by anybody. So
yes, this seems to be a common theme in the show where when someone is mad at someone, a way they sort of jab at them is not greeting them properly. You remember a few episodes when Viserys goes to Driftmark and Lord Corlys makes Viserys come to him in the Hall of Nine. And we see that this is not a greeting befitting Rhaenyra's rank and station as heir to the Iron Throne. And then in the very next scene, we learn that this is very purposeful by Otto Hightower. A servant comes in and says, oh, they have arrived. And he says, I trust they've been welcomed as befits their station. And the servant says, just as you instructed, my lord. So pretty obvious that Hightower purposely and specifically wanted to insult them. So in the King's Council, they're having a conversation about the state of the realm. I do want to note it here that Lord Beesbury is the one discussing, they're talking about some minor stuff going on, But Lord
Yes.
Beesbury becomes a little bit more important in this episode and in the next episode specifically, and he is not treated well. Lord Beesbury seems to be not necessarily pro Team Green or Team Black, but pro Realm. And his input in the small council, to me, feels pretty unbiased. Of course, that is not what Allison and Otto want to hear. So,
No,
no.
of course not. Well, Beesbury's for, I think, tradition and honor in an unbiased way, but that leaves Beesbury alone as well.
Yes, absolutely. I also want to note about the small council that our friend Jason Lannister has been appointed to the small council.
Yeah, which
Yes,
I was
so
wondering when that happened and why.
well, it had to have happened in the 6 years of this time jump because he's
Right.
not seen on the council prior to the episode. You'll remember Jason Lannister made a bid for Rhaenyra back in the day to be her husband. He was very cringe. And my assumption would be that they appointed him to the small council because of his relative position in House Lannister. They got a lot of money. They got a lot of gold. And
Yeah.
also, it seems that Lannister is willing to kiss ass and look the other way and support the Greens' claim to the throne. So, I mean, why the hell not appoint him to the small council if he's going to do your bidding and he's got a lot of money?
That's true. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I forget which council member brings it up first because they don't name him, but he brings up who's going to take over for Corlys over Driftmark. And Jason Lannister counters with, the boy has been raised most of his life away from Driftmark. He can fly a dragon, but can he command a fleet? And Beesbury steps in and says, ability does not alter his claim. Then the first councilman again says the sea snake has never formally named him as heir. And then the conversation continues and they kind of argue back and forth about whether they should be contesting Lucerys's claim to Driftmark. And then that's when Alicent steps in and says, we'll hear Rhaenyra's claim as well as other claimants the next day.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think Lord Beesbury's major objection there is he starts to say, on what grounds, and he gets cut off by that council member, and he says, on what grounds indeed, because everyone in that room knows that Rhaenyra's children are bastards, but everyone also knows that it's treason to say that. So I think Beesbury is representing an unbiased interest in the kingdom, if not for sure Viserys' interest, while everyone else in that room is all Team Green. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Alicent leaves the small council, and as she is walking to her chambers, she is stopped by a servant, and they tell her that there is a delicate matter she needs to attend to in Aegon's apartments.
Actually, it's specifically Eric, and there's two of them. So there's Auric and Eric. This one is
that's right.
Eric. And remember, with them, they play a role in some stuff that goes down in later episodes too. They kind of
You're totally
sides,
right.
I think. So
you're totally right. I had forgotten about that, so I'm glad you reminded me. I'm now having vague recollections of what their deal is, but I'm not going to say it because I don't want to say it wrong. But yes, they do come up later. Well, really has to be in the next 2 episodes. So
right. Well, Alicent does not know which one it is, and he's like, "It's Eric," and she's like, "Oh yeah, of course," and isn't really paying attention, right? I did find that a little bit interesting because, I mean, I'm sure, granted, there's a lot of knights and guards and all that stuff to keep track of, but I think as closely as they seem to work with them, she should probably know the difference. And so I thought it was interesting that she does not know the difference, and she was like, "Oh yeah, whatever."
Yeah, she's very dismissive of him. So Rhaenyra and Daemon decide to go and pay Viserys a visit. Seems pretty natural considering that's Daemon's brother and Rhaenyra's father. You know, I had a thought in that scene where she's like father and Daemon could be like brother, and it's like how often does a married couple be like
My
father,
brother. And my brother.
Yeah, a little weird. Again, gonna ignore it because I don't want to think about it.
Oh yeah. Incest doesn't matter right now.
Yep, not important. What is important is how awful Viserys looks.
Yes.
Oh my God. His transformation is horrifying. He's wasted away to basically nothing. He's literally decaying before our very, very eyes. So
he's lost an eye. His skin is just like
falling
Not
off
great.
his body. It's
not great. Rotting
unpleasant
teeth
to
and
behold.
stuff.
Well, and you can see how absolutely shocked Rhaenyra is because it's only been 6 years. So that's a pretty rapid progression for only 6 years to have passed. And you can see how absolutely shocked she is by the condition that he's in. So Daemon tells Viserys about the situation with the sea snake. And it's pretty obvious that Viserys is not really with it because he says something to the effect of, we won that battle a long time ago. And Daemon's like, no. The Triarchy has once again made a resurgence. And that's why Corlys was there. So it's pretty clear that for probably a while now, Viserys is really more of a figurehead. He's not really aware of what's going on. And we know, as this is revealed in the episode, he's on Milk of the Poppy, which is basically like morphine. And though he's pretty loopy-loop all the time. And so he's really not able to coherently understand and make decisions. And Daemon and Rhaenyra are obviously angered by this for many, many reasons, but specifically in how it pertains to how Lucerys's ascension petition is going to play out.
Yes.
But he tells Viserys that he needs him to affirm his position for Luke to be Corlys Velaryon's successor. You can see that Rhaenyra is about to cut him off because it's immediately obvious to Rhaenyra that Viserys is in no condition to have this conversation. So she then switches up the conversation and she says, we want to introduce you to someone. And in this 6-year time jump, Rhaenyra has had 2 baby childs. It's 2 boys with Daemon. And we know they're Daemon's kids because they are blonde. And the older one is Aegon, and the younger one's name is Viserys. And you can, even in Viserys's decaying state, you can tell that just makes him so happy and means so much to him. And he even says, now that is a name fit for a king. And that was just so heartbreaking because one thing we know about Viserys, he loves his grandchildren. Remember way back when Rhaenyra had Joffrey and he's like, oh, my grandson. And you can just tell that he really loves his grandkids. And so I was happy that Rhaenyra was able to share that with him and honor him in that way before Viserys passed away. So I thought that was a very sweet moment.
Yeah, I thought that was really cute as well. I did think it was interesting that she named her baby Aegon as well, though. I forget why she does that. But I was like, clearly, this really sets them up for confusion.
Yes. But you have to remember, pretty much the most important Targaryen is Aegon the Conqueror, right? He's basically the cornerstone of House Targaryen. So I would imagine that it's in reference to that. And she's just going to ignore the fact that Alicent also named her child Aegon.
Yeah. Just all the Aegon names are confusing.
Yes, it is confusing. It's also, this is such a pain in the ass. I'm typing my notes. There's Rhaenyra, Rhaenys, and Rhaena, and they're all spelt like Rhaen, etc. That is such a pain in the ass. When I'm reading, writing, thinking about this show, I'm like, Rhaenys, Rhaenyra, wait, which one is it?
Aemond, Aemond.
Exactly.
Daemon as well. Daemon, Aemon, Daemon. So many. Yeah.
God, the more I think about it, Alicent's name is like the only one that's easy to distinguish.
Semi-normal.
Yeah. But anyways, just as Viserys is doting on his new grandson, he is overcome with a bout of pain and asks for his tea. Rhaenyra gives it to him, but Daemon, being the sharp shadow daddy that he is, he takes the tea and he smells it. And he makes a face, and you immediately are like, what's in the cup? What are they giving him?
Yeah.
Again, it's revealed later. It's just milk of the poppy. It is a painkiller, so it's not like they're poisoning him or anything. But they're probably giving him so much that he basically just sleeps all day, I imagine.
Well, it renders him useless, right? And that's the point. And he even says, I want to be clear. I want to have a clear mind when he does come back to hear the petitions and everything. It's implied that, yes, it's for his pain, but simultaneously it's very convenient to give him because it renders him incapacitated.
Yes. That's exactly the word I was going to say. He's basically incapacitated. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So while Daemon and Rhaenyra are visiting Viserys, Alicent goes to handle the delicate matter at hand. You see her standing, and there's a young woman face down on the floor, sobbing. And immediately you're like, whoa, 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 what the fuck is going on? It is a handmaid who was going to take Aegon his wine, and she did not notice him there. And basically, it is revealed that he sexually assaulted her.
Mm-hmm.
The girl is absolutely hysterical. She is very upset, understandably, for many, many reasons. Her main focus should be that she is a victim of sexual assault, right? But instead, she's worried about being punished for what occurred between the two of them. And she's worried that no one will believe that Aegon forced himself on her and that she wasn't there to seduce him, which is what a crazy society to be in. That's her first reaction, right?
Right.
It's very telling of the culture, specifically in the castle, and how women are treated, which also kind of aligns with why everyone hates the idea of Rhaenyra being queen so much, because she's a woman and
yeah,
they don't like women, basically. But I will say in this scene, Alicent's response to her, I thought was actually very empathetic. She genuinely seems upset on her behalf. She, I think, is clearly later in the next scene with Aegon, she's very upset by what has occurred. But ultimately, despite her being upset on her behalf, it doesn't change anything. She still pays her off, makes her drink the tea because she wants to cover it up and protect Aegon. So I give a little props to Alicent, because Alicent, she gives her a hug and she tells her, I believe you. And I know it's not your fault, which is nice that she affirms that for the girl, because you can even see the girl is like, you believe me? Really?
Yeah.
She's stunned by this, right? Because she thinks she's about to, get executed, basically. And Alicent spins it to the girl as, it's not you that I worry about, it's what others might believe. The knight already knows, Talia, the other handmaid, knows. And you wouldn't want people to think that you're that kind of girl who, seduces young princes. And so she gives her a bag of money, gives her the tea. And I couldn't tell if they actually basically fire her from the castle or she's still allowed to continue to work there.
I think the money implies she was fired, or she was told to leave. And they gave her money just to make sure she could support herself. But
hush, hush.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense, because remember Helena comes in and she says, where's Diana? She's supposed to get the children dressed. Yes. Yeah. Also important to note, when Helena comes in and she says that line, it's revealed to us that her and Aegon have children together. We don't meet them or see them yet, which I hadn't thought about that, honestly, now until we were just saying it. I was like, oh, they've already made heirs, which honestly helps Team Green out a little bit.
I had totally skipped over that.
Yeah,
so.
I literally did not think about it until just this moment. So
yeah.
No fault there. Right after her interaction with Diana the handmaid, Alicent goes to Aegon's room. He is passed out. And she starts screaming at him, wake up, wake up, wake up. And he's like, what? And so she starts interrogating him about Diana, the servant girl. And he's like, oh, what? What do you mean? Diana's just totally out of it and just does not even care.
Plays it off like it's fun, right? He's like, it's just some good fun. Haha, no worries.
Yes. And Alicent is absolutely outraged by this. She says, think of the shame of your wife on me and today of all days. And he's like, what day is it? And that's when she just loses her shit. So she slaps him and she says it with such a venom in her voice. It's devastating when she says it. She says, you are no son of mine. And you can even see Aegon's face change.
Yes.
Vicious. But I mean, can you blame her? Her son's a rapist. Ugh.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I thought it was interesting how Aegon immediately shifts and he's like, I did not ask for this. I try so hard. There'll never be enough for your father, which I'm not sympathetic to his cause in this regard at all. Obviously, he sexually assaulted a girl, so there's no excuse for that. But it does play into this idea that we've discussed about how Alicent treats her children, and that
Mhm.
Aegon ultimately feels very unsupported, unloved, and that he's really just a pawn for Alicent and Otto to use to secure the Iron Throne.
Yeah, I think just his upbringing in general is the root of
Mhm.
how he's become. Even with Aemond, you see that too. That's where you see that darker side of Aemond as well, although they've changed in other respects. But the underlying implication is obviously that I think a lot of what Aegon does is to get attention. Obviously, it's in the worst possible way of
Oh,
taking
yeah.
that approach to get attention from your parents. He's literally doing heinous things.
Oh, yeah.
But the way that he was treated growing up, I think
Mhm.
definitely factored into how he's developed
Oh,
as
yeah,
we
I
see
agree.
him currently.
Mhm. Promptly after this, Alicent goes to greet Daemon and Rhaenyra. Alicent comes in, and I don't know if you caught this, but there was a very quick camera cut to the scar on Rhaenyra's arm that she
I saw
received
that,
regarding
yeah.
the Witchblade. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so it's very, very quick, very subtle, but I think that was just an interesting directorial choice to sort of remind us of what happened the last time those two were in a room together. It wasn't good.
Well, and I think it's also meant to emphasize part of why she hasn't been back to King's Landing in a long time either.
Mhm. That's true. I hadn't thought about that, but I think you're absolutely right. So Alicent comes in and she greets them, and Daemon immediately, he's not here for it. He is very sassy. He does not like Alicent. He makes it very clear. And she says, oh, something to the effect of how many years have passed. And Daemon says, clearly not enough for you to greet us.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
That whole
And
conversation was so sassy.
it was. And you see Rhaenyra sort of play peacekeeper between the two of them. She tells Daemon, I'm sure she was attending to things of great importance, my love. You know, like she's trying to
Oh, Brett,
sort of,
I read that as extreme sarcasm. I was like, oh, she's 100% being sarcastic right now. She was playing with
Mhm.
Daemon, I think, in that moment. 100%.
I don't know. I could definitely see it go either way. Maybe it's a little bit of both, right? She's still trying to be polite, peaceful, but also it's a very subtle barb, right? So I could see it going either way. And now I need to go back and rewatch that because now I'm not sure.
I thought it was 100% sarcasm. I was like, oh, she's just playing with Daemon. Because the quote, it went like, I'm sure the queen is pressing business. And Daemon's saying it in kind of a sassy tone. And then Rhaenyra is like, what can either of us know of ruling a kingdom?
Yes,
I'm just
and
like, okay, yeah, she's like
y
fucking with her for
yes,
sure. So,
yes, and then Alicent responds to that quote, "I do not rule as you know. My father and I express Viserys's wisdom." And this is where Daemon pops off with, "Oh yes, and how does he do that with blinks and wheezes?" Because as we saw earlier, Viserys is incapacitated and basically can't even form a full sentence. So I
mhm.
find it a little odd, and so does Daemon, that somehow Viserys is conveying his vision for the realm to
Right.
Hightower and Alicent. It's clear that they're not. And Rhaenyra and Daemon are very angry that he's basically being kept dependent on milk with a poppy and is essentially just laying there doing nothing. I think she
Mhm.
says something to the effect of, you're keeping him addled on milk with a poppy. So addled carrying a lot of the weight there, and that he
Yes.
really cannot form a coherent thought.
Mhm.
At the end of that conversation, I believe it's Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra also points out that a lot of things have changed about King's Landing since she's been there, specifically in the castle. And she's upset by this, I think, because from her perspective, Alicent has removed a lot of the Targaryen art and
Yes.
artifacts and memorabilia, right? She's
Mhm.
removed a lot of the tapestries, the sculptures that depict dragons and previous Targaryens. And instead, the castle is very stark now and has been replaced with several depictions of the seven pointed star. And you see throughout this episode, Alicent is wearing a very large, kind of bronzy gold pendant of a seven pointed star. And we learn that represents the new religion of the seven gods, and the seven pointed star represents those gods. And it's not discussed a lot in this episode, but there are a couple subtle nods to this newfound religiosity that Alicent has. At the beginning of the family dinner scene, she tells Viserys, "Shall we pray first?" And this is a new character development for Alicent. We see in the past, she's not particularly religious. And I think that this is something that changes for Alicent for a couple reasons. The first is, I think that, as we've discussed, Alicent is very lonely. She has very little to no support system. And clearly with Viserys' declining health, she's really isolated. And so I think that she finds comfort and community in this newfound religiosity. I also think that it's sort of a way for her to absolve her conscience of the things that she has done in the past. It makes her feel better, I think, about some of the choices that she's made and clearly a lot of the thoughts that she's had.
I found it interesting because remember when in the last episode where Rhaenyra makes that comment about how she's been hiding beneath her cloak of her own self-righteousness, et cetera, et cetera. And so I
Yes.
felt like this played really perfectly into that to some extent. I do think that perhaps there's a little bit of guilt on Alicent's end about things, but I think she's trying to reconnect with, I don't know what exactly, but it plays into this general sort of duty, righteousness, character aspect of Alicent from when she was younger, for sure. But
Yes.
I also believe that I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly in Game of, I think this religion was present there as well. But the religion almost presents to be above any of the houses, right? So they kind of take over in a way that circumvents the power and authority of the actual houses, right? It's like the king is the king, but really the religious figureheads have more authority than they do. And so that was interesting to me because, Rhaenyra points that out and she says, "And on the morrow, which authority will sit in judgment and my son's claim on his own inheritance?" And Alicent says, "That would be mine and the hands." But she says, "The Father is just and commands me to forget the accusations you have hurled in this room today." And then she walks out. And so I think on a longer term scale, this is the inception of religious authority replacing authority of the actual house that is in charge. They are presenting as just to establish this sense that the religious of the seven is above even Targaryens. Nobody is stronger than the gods, so to speak. Because, before this, Targaryens have always been a very powerful house. Obviously, they're more powerful than any of the other houses because of their connections to dragons, which is very unique. But I think this adherence to religion is making this claim that you're not above the gods, though. And I'm going to change this house to kind of get rid of the Targaryens in a way and establish a different authority, so to speak.
That's a really good call. I hadn't thought about it from that aspect, but when you put all of those thoughts and details together, it makes a lot of sense. Probably after, Jace and Luke are going to the training yard. And it is obvious in this scene that they are very close and very protective of each other. And this is something we discussed earlier, but I think it's highlighted in this scene as well. Luke is uncomfy. He says, "Everyone's staring at us." And Jace basically tells him, "Don't worry about it. Doesn't matter what they think." And I thought that was nice that he's trying to comfort and protect him and encourage him to just, keep it moving. Don't worry about it. They're over by the weapons stand, and all of a sudden there's a bit of a commotion in the yard, and you see a bunch of people gathered around two figures who are sparring, and it happens to be Aemond and Kristen Cole. Let me just say, Shadow Daddy Daemon is still my number one. But Aemond, he's got it going on, okay? I don't know if it's like the long hair again or the eye patch, but I think it's the way he smirks. He just has I don't know. I'm here for it. I like Aemond.
He's very self-assured, for sure. He has a lot of confidence. And he has that dark undercurrent that's similar to Daemon. So
he's a lot of swagger. The way he carries himself, it's very attractive to me. But they watch Aemon and Kristen fight. I think it's just a way for us to be exposed to those characters and see that they've grown up a little bit, and also that they're both formidable opponents, because Aemon, he doesn't kick Kristen's ass, but he does a pretty good job against him. And Kristen is a very well-trained knight. I mean, even though I hate Kristen Cole, I have to admit that he's pretty good at fighting. So,
right. Well, in that conversation, after they're done and Kristen Cole says, "Well done, my prince, you'll be winning tourneys in no time." And then Aemon's like, "I don't give a shit about tourneys."
He really doesn't.
So from that, it's also very clear that Aemon is very disciplined. He's very kind of eyes on the prize. Like, I got one goal and one goal only.
Yeah.
First, we see Daemon arrive with his posse at the very end of that scene.
Oh, yeah.
And he comes in with his whole little group of people trailing after him.
Of course he does. Freaking course he does. So Daemon arrives, and he is meeting with Alicent and Otto in the small council room. And it seems that more so Daemon and Otto have teamed up and are kind of putting pressure on Alicent to just go along with what they want. Alicent even says in that conversation that she feels uneasy because Corlys very well may live. And Daemon and Otto sort of manipulate her by saying, well, we need to do what's best for the realm. And I cannot say with confidence that Alicent is actually okay with what they're doing. It seems that she does feel a little uneasy about so publicly stating the crown's stance on Rhaenyra's children. Because if they were to grant it to Daemon, that would pretty much be a public acknowledgement that Rhaenyra's children are bastards. And I don't think Alicent feels good about that. But ultimately, she is persuaded in that conversation to do what's best for the realm, quote unquote. And Daemon throws in a nice little hint, hint, wink, wink, where he says, the next Lord of Driftmark will surely be in your debt. And heavily implying that if he is named Lord of Driftmark, that he will be on Team Green's side. And should their need arise of a naval force, then he, of course, will be at their beck and call. There's some pretty strong incentives for Team Green to name Daemon as the heir. They would get multiple benefits out of that. One, screwing Rhaenyra and her children and publicly humiliating them. And two, having Daemon in their pocket should they need his naval force.
Yeah, I think so too. I would agree that I think Alicent was playing the middle ground, but she does say we must, of course, act in the interest of our subjects before she leaves. That's her final statement to them.
Yeah. In the next scene, we see Rhaenys, and she is standing in the Godswood, and Rhaena comes with Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra compliments Rhaenys on doing a good job raising Baela, and I think it's genuine, but also pretty obvious that she's trying to flatter Rhaenys because she needs Rhaenys' help. There's really no way around it. And Rhaenys, being the sharp woman that she is, picks up on that immediately. So Rhaenyra tells Rhaena that she wants to speak with Rhaenys alone, and Rhaena leaves. And Rhaenyra starts out with, I wondered why you came here, and that she couldn't figure out whether it was to support Viserys or to support Daemon. But then Rhaenyra has the realization that she has come to speak on behalf of herself. And we know that this is thematically on brand for Rhaenys, right?
Yeah.
I think Rhaenys lives in this constant state of, for the most part, she is okay that she was passed over for the Iron Throne. However, she is not okay with how women are treated and are not perceived to be fit for places of power. And I think that is evident in a lot of Rhaenys' actions, that she is always going to look for, in any situation, a way to angle, of course, what's best for her, but ultimately what's best for the ability to have women in power. For example, when she wanted Driftmark to pass to Laena's children, right? Traditionally, it would pass to Laenor. And again, part of that is the whole bastard situation. But I do think that Rhaenys wishes for a different world and wishes for a world in which women are seen as reasonable candidates candidates for positions of power.
I agree that I think she's changed in wanting to actually assert or make more moves to put women in positions of power. But I kind of felt like this was Rhaenys more or less taking opportunity herself, right? 'Cause originally she was planning to make a plea for her own claim to Driftmark. That to me implies that she saw this opportunity, right? Because previously she hadn't really done very much because she was like, I can't really do anything. It's a man's game. There's not much I can do. So why would I try? But now that Corlys is potentially dying, she's kind of like, as far as Lucerys goes, there's the pretty real option that Lucerys would not get Driftmark. And given that Corlys hasn't specifically named an heir yet, then it does leave it pretty wide open for Rhaenys to take, right? It's a great opportunity for her to take that. So it's kind of like right place, right time kind of situation for her.
Yeah, I agree. As the conversation continues between Rhaenyra and Rhaenys, Rhaenyra points out that no matter what happens tomorrow, it will not be a fair proceeding. Rhaenyra pleads to Rhaenys for herself, and she pretty much lays her cards on the table. She tells Rhaenys, I know you think I ordered Laener's death. I did not. I loved him. I was not complicit, and I swear this to you. And Rhaenyra is being truthful. She is not complicit in his death because he's not dead. Of course, Rhaenys doesn't know that, but what Rhaenyra is saying is genuine. And I do believe that she did love Laenor, and that she would never have actually sanctioned his killing in any way. So she makes Rhaenys an offer, and she says, if you back Luke's claim, then we will betroth our children to Laena. So Baela can marry Jace, and Rhaena can marry Luke. This will mean that Baela will be queen of the Seven Kingdoms, and her children will be heir to the throne, and Rhaena will rule Driftmark with Lucerys, and one day Driftmark will pass to their children. This is honestly best case for everybody. It kind of works out pretty well. And I would imagine that would be enticing to Rhaenys because it puts the Velaryon children in additional seats of power, but it also is a way to mix true Velaryon blood back into the bloodlines, which I do think Rhaenys does care about, given the conversation she had with Corlys in the last episode in the Hall of Nine, where she wants Driftmark to pass to Laena's children because she knows that Jace and Luke are bastards. So it's kind of a great deal for her. However, Rhaenys says a generous offer or a desperate one. And she's not wrong. Rhaenyra says, does it really matter? And Rhaenys says, I suppose it does not. But make no mistake, tomorrow the High Towers land the first blow, and I must stand alone. And
yes,
I thought that phrasing was interesting. I took it to mean that Rhaenys essentially wants to stay out of it, that she doesn't really want to have to pick a side. And by publicly announcing that she supports Lucerys' claim, it is kind of her taking Team Black's side. And I think that for as long as possible, Rhaenys wants to stay out of it and not necessarily publicly announce that she's pro Team Green or pro Team Black.
Yeah, I felt like she was really trying to keep her options open, right? Because optionality is the best situation for anybody. You don't want to declare allegiance to somebody who is then just going to get ousted immediately, because then you're ousted too by affiliation. And so she feels strongly in this moment that it would not be wise to align with Rhaenyra just yet. She just wants to stay out, sit back, observe, see how it plays out, and then make a decision, which I think is pretty wise, honestly.
Agreed. Absolutely.
So in the next scene, Rhaenyra is in Viserys' room, and she's basically making her final plea. She says, by naming me heir, you divided the realm. I thought I wanted it, but the burden is a heavy one. It's too heavy. So Viserys responds with, my only child, in this kind of half lucid drug state. And then she makes her plea. She says, if you wish me to bear it, then defend me and my children. This indicates to me that Rhaenyra now feels very conflicted. She's realized how messy everything has gotten over a battle for the throne. And now she sort of wishes that she hadn't been heir in a way. Obviously, it's too late now, but the only reason she continues is because both of them believe in the prophecy, the Song of Ice and Fire. That's the impression that I was getting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought this whole scene was just honestly really heartbreaking. I think that
Yeah.
Rhaenyra is really starting to feel the pressure of the situation. Tensions are starting to boil over. And I also think this is a moment where she realizes that Viserys is not long for this world, right? His end is near, and she'll lose her father. But not only that, she'll lose really the only person who truly supported her from the very beginning. And I think that's really hard for her to face. And that I think she needs this validation of one last time Viserys taking a stand for her and defending her claim to the throne. And so I found this scene very heartbreaking, to be honest. And in general, I thought the actress did a really good job in this scene.
Emma Darcy.
I know, she's
great actress. So we cut to a different scene. I think it's the next day at some point, and Viserys is being treated for his condition, which is kind of like, what are you guys really doing for him at this point? I don't really know, but Otto tries to offer him some milk of the poppy, but Viserys says no. And I was like, yes, Viserys. And I think he's realized that it's a very dire situation, and this may be his last chance to defend Rhaenyra. So I thought that was excellent decision, Viserys.
Lorraine, you want to know what I titled that scene in my notes?
Viserys leeches?
No, I titled it the wound watch scene.
Oh, the wound watch scene. Oh, yeah. How could I forget?
Although I don't feel like it's really wound watch anymore because it's not subtle. It's pretty obvious, but it's gruesome. It's really unpleasant to behold.
Yeah. I mean, he basically looks like a corpse at this point, so.
He really does.
But yeah. Anyways, next we move on to likely the biggest scene of the whole episode. At least I think.
Oh, yeah. There's no question. My notes for this particular scene are huge.
Yeah, they're so long.
Yeah.
Yep. Basically.
Yes.
So we have everybody gathered in the court, the throne room, to determine the succession for Driftmark. And it's interesting to me that Otto is the one who's seated on the throne, not Alicent. Alicent's off to the side, and Otto's sitting on the chair. I don't know if there's a specific reason for that. Like, is Otto supposed to be in charge of court proceedings specifically?
Yes. So my understanding of the dynamics of the hierarchy within the court is that, think of it like Viserys is the president and Otto is the vice president. Alicent is definitely more than a symbolic figurehead, but when push comes to shove, Otto is higher up than she is in terms of representing the crown's interests.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really the best way I can think to describe it, is like a president and a vice president.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fine then. I was going to make
It's still odd, though. I agree. You would think it would be Alicent, right? Because she is the queen. Because she sits in all the council meetings. And, you know, when you think about it, actually, as I'm saying it, she always sits in Viserys' chair in the council meetings.
Yeah.
So it's like, in this situation, why would it be Hightower? But yeah, it's a little odd.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm not sure. Well, that saves me from making a snide remark about him, I guess. Save that for later. But anyways, so we obviously start off the scene with Daemon first. And surprise, surprise, he's arguing for himself and claiming his true, undeniable Valyrian blood.
I also thought it was interesting that during Daemon's petition to Hightower, before Viserys comes in, he says, "The true, unimpeachable blood of House Velaryon runs through my veins." And we discussed this earlier in regards to Daemon's character, but Daemon is very, very hung up on the bloodline thing. He does not care about the name thing that Lord Corlys hangs his hat on. It's very important to him, and he wants everyone to know that he has true Velaryon blood. And hint, hint, wink, wink, Jace and Luke do not. And so these are really bold words to use in such a public setting. I mean, he does quite literally shout it in about 3 minutes, but he's basically shouting it right now. Just that statement alone, honestly, could be considered treason and an executable offense. So he's risking it all.
Absolutely. Well, he feels really confident, right? Before that, he was under the impression that him and Otto and Allison had a deal.
Absolutely.
In his mind, he's like, I'm free and clear to say whatever I want because there's no consequences for me. So Rhaenyra tries to counter, but she is shut down by Alicent. And I don't have the entirety of the conversation, but it's not going well for Rhaenyra. But just as it's getting particularly bad, Viserys enters. I don't know if you had any notes before that, but I was like, hell yeah. It was just so like grand.
Epic.
I don't even know.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was epic. That's a perfect word. Yes.
Yes. It is directorially just beautiful, right? Just the way the doors are flung open and you see Viserys, and it's such a moving scene. I actually wrote, why am I getting so emotional right now? I literally have goosebumps. I really did. There's something that is just so beautiful about that. Viserys is quite literally on his deathbed, basically, and he still finds a way to summon the strength and resolve to show up for his child and defend her. And it just, I don't know, there's something about his grit in that scene that is really moving.
Yeah. I think that this was him making his final stand, right? Because if we remember in previous episodes, he had that question where he asked,
will I be remembered as a good king?
Yeah. How will I be remembered if I had been tested, et cetera, et cetera? And I feel like this was kind of his big final moment to make a statement.
It's his crucible. This is his crucible, and he's forged. And I feel like it does offer some absolution for him. And although he wasn't the best king, it does soften me a bit to him.
Well, I do appreciate that throughout all of this, he has always stayed consistent in his support of Rhaenyra. He has never faltered from that. So, if there's anything that he's been grounded in, it has been his support of his decision to have Rhaenyra be his heir.
Yes.
But anyways, as Viserys enters, you're seeing, as it does in this show, panning between everybody, looking around at each other, and you can definitely see Alicent and Daemon and Otto all give each other looks like, what the fuck? Oh shit, yeah.
Everyone is totally shocked by that. Considering Viserys can barely get from the bed to the chair without assistance, for him to not only get out of bed, get dressed, but to literally walk, that is a long distance.
That's a long
to the
walk.
throne. Yes, it really, really is. And I love when he passes Hightower and he says, I will sit the throne today. Just the way he delivers that line. It gives the oomph. I'm like, yes, I really like that.
Yes. And then right after that, as Viserys struggles up the stairs, Daemon helps him up. And it was just such a nice full circle moment for them to finally, after having years of separation and not being together, you really see the three of them, Viserys, Rhaenyra, and Daemon, come together.
Yes.
And solidify at the very end.
You literally took the words right out of my mouth. I put full circle moment. It is just, it's so impactful, I feel like, because you see a knight comes to try to help Viserys and he's like, no, I'm fine. And then the crown falls off his head and he's really not going to make it. And it's Daemon who comes to pick it up and he's like, no, I'm fine. But when he sees it's Daemon, he stops and he lets Daemon help him. And I think that's all Daemon really wanted, was for Viserys to admit that he needed Daemon's help. And although this is a pretty small instance, I thought it was so nice. And then I love at the very end of that sequence when Daemon puts the crown back on his head. It's such a beautiful shot. There's just something about it, again, that I found very moving. And it's just, it makes me happy. That's a positive moment that ultimately ends up really being Daemon and Viserys' last moments that they have together.
Yeah, very symbolic for sure. So as Viserys sits down, he says, I do not understand why petitions are being heard over a settled succession. The only one who can offer keener insight is Princess Rhaenys. This is a big moment because Rhaenys looks pleasantly surprised by this. She's like, oh, me? Is that my turn? And you can see the wheels turning because she never thought she was going to be in this position. And she really has to make a split-second decision, I think, about what she's going to do. And in this moment, she makes a stand and lets it be known that she is on Team Black now. And she says, it was ever my husband's will that Driftmark pass through Sir Laenor to his true-born son, Viserys Velaryon. His mind never changed, nor did my support. And then she also goes on to announce Rhaenyra's proposal to marry Jason Luke to Baela and Rhaena. And then again, you see the camera pan over to Hightower and Alicent, and you just like know that they're definitely shell-shocked and then pissed because their plans are foiled now.
Yeah. Talk about coming out of left field. Nobody saw this coming.
Did not. But excellent. I'm glad it panned out this way.
Yeah.
So Viserys' final words about the matter are, well, the matter is settled again. I hereby reaffirm Prince Lucerys Velaryon as heir to Driftmark. But of course, we're not done yet, even though Daemon should have just kept his mouth shut, but of course he couldn't. So he goes on to argue, and he's very heated at this point, and he says, that is no true Velaryon. He's talking about Driftmark. He says, I will not have House Velaryon ended on the account of, and then he trails off. And my first bullet was, ooh, shit, fiery scene.
It was funny. I wrote, ooh, baby. Yeah. I think it's so brazen of Daemon because his first reaction is to insult Viserys. He says, you break law and tradition by naming Rhaenyra heir, but I will not allow it. And then he goes on to say, you may run your house as you see fit, but you will not run mine. And then he screams, that's no true Velaryon, that's no nephew of mine. But that is really bold of him to pop off to Viserys, right? Because he's literally the king. And you can hear people in the crowd gasp. They're like, because I have to say, honestly, I respect Daemon. I really do. Because
he's got balls.
He does. And he stands on principle because, let's be honest, I actually feel bad for Daemon because he's not wrong and everybody knows it. He's just saying the truth, okay? And if you want to get really technical, the law stipulates that it would go to a blood relative, not to Jason Luke. I understand there's a nuances of politics and the acknowledgement and all that, but ultimately, Daemon is killed for speaking the truth and standing on principle. And it's not really fair to him, honestly. I mean, he's also an asshole, so. But I don't know.
Did he deserve the outcome that he got? Probably not.
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, Driftmark should pass to him. It really should. If Corlys were to die. Of course, Corlys didn't even die, so it's kind of like for nothing. But I have some sympathy for Daemon in these moments. I really do.
Yeah, I see where he's coming from. But I'm like, bro, read the room. This is not going to play out well for you.
Read the room.
Like, seriously. Have some social awareness.
After Daemon has attacked Viserys, and he is now moving on to Rhaenyra and Rhaenyra's children, he says, my house survived the doom and 1,000 tribulations besides, and the gods be damned, I will not see it end on account of this. And he looks to Daemon, and Daemon says, say it. And the look in Daemon's eyes, he just looks hot.
He's like,
he looks hot. He looks
he's glowering. Or what's that word? Glowering? Is that how you say it?
Yes, that's a perfect way to describe it.
Anyways, so Daemon beats him. He's like, say it. And Daemon calls the children bastards. And then he calls Rhaenyra a whore. And then Viserys stands up, takes out his knife, and he's like, I will have your tongue for that. And then, bam! Daemon just slices his
a little slicey slice there. Whoops. Just
cut off.
Done
Nothing
for.
left to say. Yep.
Done for.
We love Shadow Daddy Daemon. All caps. Bold.
I want that on a sticker. I'm going to order myself a sticker.
We love Shadow Daddy
Daemon. Yes.
And all he says is, he can keep his tongue.
He can keep his tongue.
Yep.
Badass. Delicious.
I love it. Love it. Bye-bye, Daemon.
Which kind of sucks for Corlys because all this happens on his account because he might die and then he
right, and he's like, I'm not even dead.
And his brother's gone. Like, oh dang.
Well, you know what, they would have disagreed about this though, because Corlys
of
was
course
for Luke taking it, and he was not about to have Daemon argue against him on that matter. Anyways, right after that, Viserys moans in pain as he collapses into his throne, and Alicent runs up to him and says, "You must take something for your pain." And he's like, again, no, I will not cloud my mind. I must put things right. Viserys is clearly trying to make his last stand. He's really trying to set things straight. He's realized that over the past, what seems to be a few years at least of him, with the progression of his disease and his health declining and the fact that he's been getting milk of the poppy, he just hasn't been present to assert his status as king. But in this moment, he is making the last ditch effort to try to set the record straight for everybody.
Yeah. Agreed.
So after this scene, obviously Daemon is dead now, and Rhaenys is down in the sept, and she's watching as the Silent Sisters prepare Daemon's body to be sent back to Driftmark. The scene felt a little bit odd and random to me at first, but after doing some digging on Reddit, this is why it was interesting. This is what other people sourced to be why it was interesting. Based off what I found on Reddit, one, it really solidifies the side she has chosen. So Rhaenys has faced a lot of death in witnessing people fight for power and title. She also feels conflicted because obviously we know she knows Daemon was right. The issue is something she herself brought up with Corlys, but now she has chosen to side with the lie in an effort to look out for her granddaughters and herself and her family that remains. And this also means she is defending the daughter of the man who usurped her for the throne. Because remember, Rhaenys, queen who never was, Viserys surpassed her. And I had forgotten about that too. I think it's just a very contemplative scene for her as she wrestles with all of these feelings that she's feeling. And then the second thing that is important about the scene is that it keeps her in King's Landing to witness Aegon's crowning and be able to report back to the Blacks. And so it sets her up to make her great escape in accordance with Helena's vision. Which I was like, oh,
the board.
That's right. That's right. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Good insight.
Yes. Thank you, Reddit. The other thing that I looked up really quick because I was unsure about it was the stranger that Rhaenys mentioned. And apparently it is their version of the god of death in this world, which makes sense because Rhaenys has seen and been a part of a lot of death.
Yeah. I really like the line she delivers there where she says, "I've looked upon the stranger many times. It matters not whether my eyes are open or closed." And just the power that she delivers that line. She has seen some shit. Okay. She has.
For sure.
It's time for the family dinner. Everyone is gathered per Viserys' request. So you've got Team Green, Team Black, basically everyone. I don't think anyone's missing except for maybe young Aegon and young Viserys. But all the older children, Alicent, Viserys, Daemon, Otto, etc., everyone's there. And Viserys is carried in, which is kind of sad to see because in the beginning of the show, he's so strong and he's very regal. He always carried himself really well. And so to see him now in such a state is really sad. But he starts off with a toast and he says, we need to celebrate the young princes and their betrothals, because we know Jason and Luke are betrothed to Rhaena and Baela, which actually in that scene, the way it plays, it seems like they're all really happy about it. They all like each other because there's even a part where I think it's Rhaena who tells Luke, "You'll be great."
Yeah, I feel like Rhaena and Baela and Jason and Luke are really close. And I feel like that was also evident in the previous episode when they were still younger kids. They're all defending each other. And it seems like Aemond and Aegon and Helena are the ones that have been othered, so to speak.
Yeah. And then right before Viserys gives his big speech, Aegon leans over and he starts teasing Jace and he's like, oh, we can finally get laid now. And then he continues and he's like, you do know how it works, don't you? Which honestly is kind of funny to me because I don't know. It just seems kind of funny. But Jace doesn't take it very well. And I actually like that his issue is not so much that Aegon is giving him a hard time, but he says, hold your tongue before my betrothed, because it's not proper for Aegon to be talking about sex in front of a lady. And so I like that he's very defensive of Bela's virtue and honor. And so again, I think we've talked about this already, but Jace is obviously a very honorable and respectable young man. And, you know, it's just nice to see. It makes you want to root for him, right? So
yes, absolutely.
But Viserys's toast, monologue, speech, whatever you want to call it, absolutely devastating. It is just so heart-wrenching. It's happy and sad all at the same time. He really just expresses, it's almost, no, not almost, it really is his dying words. It's last sort of love letter to his family. And he tells them, I love you all, but you've grown so distant. And then he takes off his mask. And honestly, I know it's supposed to be a heartfelt moment, but I was like, because it's so horrifying. It's horrifying to look at. But he ties it in nicely. And he says, I want you to see me as I am to you, a husband, a father, a grandsire, a brother. And it's really touching because he's really putting himself in a very vulnerable state, physically and emotionally, you know? And he pleads to them to set aside their grievances. And you can see that visibly, especially Alicent and Rhaenyra are very moved by this. Even Daemon, and I think Otto a little bit. I think Aegon, Aemon, Jason, Luke are a little less so. But the main key players of this season, Rhaenyra, Alicent, and Viserys, I think will have this sort of retrospective moment where they're like, why are we fighting? We used to be close. We used to love each other. So why are we at each other's throats? And just you can see that Rhaenyra is very moved by this. So then she promptly after Viserys finishes, she gives a toast. And she says, I wish to raise my cup to the queen. I love my father, but no one has stood more loyally by his side than his wife. She has stood by him and she has my gratitude. And I wrote, damn, everyone's getting emotional in here.
Yeah, literally.
It's true. Yeah. And I thought that was really touching and really big of Rhaenyra for her to take the first step in extend the olive branch. And you can see that Alicent is very moved by this. I thought really, truly the acting in this scene was really incredible because you can still feel there's this undercurrent of tension, but then you can still feel this remembrance of love and respect that they used to really cherish each other. After that, Alicent decides that she's also going to give a toast. And she says, we're both mothers and we love our children and we have more in common than we might allow. And she says, I raise my cup to you in your house and you will make a fine queen. And for this brief, fleeting moment, I'm like, oh, everything's going to be okay. This is all going to work out. We're going to be fine. Like, we can do this, guys. And then it all goes to shit very quickly.
Yeah, I had the same note between Viserys' toast and then Rhaenyra and Alicent. My note was, I think this honestly makes the future events that occur so much sadder because Viserys makes this final plea in front of everyone and then just like poof, it just all goes to shit and hits the fan.
So quickly.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
So everyone seems like they're in a good mood. They're in a good place. But then who has to fuck it up? You know who has to fuck it up. It's Aegon. Okay? Douchebag Aegon. And he says to Bela, always, every God, fucking Aegon. Ugh. See, he's probably my least favorite quote unquote villain of the show because at least Kristen and Otto have purpose behind their nonsense. Aegon's just a disrespectful little shit. Okay, anyway, I digress. Aegon says, I really don't like Aegon.
I like how we had this whole conversation earlier off camera about like victims and then becoming like perpetrators, and now we're like, but Aegon's still a shithead.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Whoops. Anyway, Aegon says to Bela, I regret the disappointment you are soon to suffer, and if you want to be satisfied, all you have to do is ask. And understandably, Jace gets very angry because this is super inappropriate. That's his betrothed. I mean, if someone said that to my fiance, I'd knock teeth out. I'm like, excuse me, say that again, you know?
It also makes it worse knowing the background about Aegon's most recent transgression when you're like, oh shit. Watch out.
Not a good look. Not a good look for him at all. Jace gets really angry and he like bangs on the table and he stands. And you can see he's like really trying to hold it together. He's like, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't punch him. Don't do it. And so instead he covers it by making a toast to his uncles Aegon and Aemond, which when he said uncles, I was like, ew, that's right. Technically they are his uncles. It's kind of weird.
Don't want to think about that.
But yeah. But in the middle of that toast, Helena watch moment, she mutters something very quickly. She says, beware the beast beneath the boards. And so I know what this means, but I'm going to pretend like I forgot until it's revealed. I think it's in the next episode. But just remember that phrase, beware the beast beneath the boards. I believe she says it again a few more times in the next episode too. So we'll talk about it next week. But
yeah.
Then Helena decides to give a toast. Dear sweet Helena. Every time she talks, I'm like, oh, sweet summer child. But she makes a toast to Bela and Rhaena. And she says, marriage isn't so bad. He mostly just ignores you, except sometimes when he's drunk. And you can hear everybody just start to snicker and laugh, especially Daemon. You have to know that he is just dying on the other side of the table. But there's a moment where everyone's like, okay, anyways. So Jace rescues Helena from the awkwardness and he asks her to dance. And we get this montage where everyone just seems so happy. Everyone's laughing and eating and dancing. And Viserys looks really wistful and just contemplative, but in a peaceful and happy way. And I think this is the moment where he decides that it's okay for him to let go. And that's okay for him to move on into the great beyond, because he has this hope that his family will be okay and will get along, and that his final plea maybe will finally stick. And so they promptly take Viserys back to his chambers. As soon as Viserys is gone, the moment's over. Just like that, it's gone. So the way this scene is directed is so chef's kiss. It's perfect, okay? So you see Luke, and then you see Aemond, and they place a roasted pig in front of Aemond. And if you recall back 2 or 3 episodes, when their boys are much younger, they're all in the dragon pit before Aemond gets his dragon. They tell him they found him a dragon. And instead, they dressed up a really giant pig as a dragon. And they're like, oh, it's the pink dread. Ha, 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 ha. And Aemond is very upset by this. And so my thought was, and I think, Lorraine, I'm assuming you had the same thought, is that Luke is laughing. He's kind of snickering to himself because he's remembering that joke.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to make sure I wasn't the only one. Okay, good. I needed that validation. It's pretty clear that Aemond figures out what Luke is thinking about pretty quickly. So then Aemond decides to make a toast. And it starts out kind of nice. You're like, okay. And so he's talking about Jace and Luke to his nephews. And he says, each of them are handsome, wise, strong.
Yep.
Strong. And you're like, and then everyone kind of gives a look. And you think, okay, strong is a compliment, right? But then he says, let's raise our cups to these 3 strong boys. And Jace is like, say it again. And then all hell breaks loose. Jace punches Aemond. Aemond attacks Luke. And they get separated pretty quickly. But you're like, well, moment's gone. It was nice.
Yeah, so much for a nice family dinner.
Yeah. So they get the kids out of there. Rhaenyra gets up and she tells Alicent, I think it's best if we go to Dragonstone. And Alicent takes her hand. She says, but you've only just arrived. And that moment is so touching because it feels so genuine. I felt you could really feel that Alicent didn't want her to go. She wanted to try to hang on to this feeling in this moment. And she wants to try to repair the rift between them. So she says, I'll see the children back home and then I'll return a dragon back. And Alicent says, well, the king and I would really like that. And so you're just like, oh, maybe it still will be okay. Rhaenyra and Alicent, they can do this. They can work it out. But it is not to be. It is not to be.
But too late.
a bit too late. Yeah. I think of all the scenes, I think episode 5 is still my favorite, but this is one of my favorite scenes of the entire series. I just really like this scene. The next scene, I didn't really have a ton about this. I just want to note it here. I feel like Lady Massaria is going to become much more important in the second season because she keeps sneaking in there. But there's a very brief sequence, it's maybe 20 seconds long, where you see Lady Massaria. And I wasn't sure about this, so I wanted to ask you. I think it's one of the handmaids because she looked familiar. Is that who you recognized her to be?
think so too. She was the handmaid that was with Alicent when she was talking to Diana, I believe. She was behind her. I'm pretty sure that was the
Okay.
same woman.
That's what I
So,
thought too, but I just wanted to confirm with you.
yeah, so it seems Lady Massaria is still getting information about what's going on in the castles, but I think specifically she's spying on Aegon because I'm pretty sure she's also the one who figures out what Aegon's doing with his betting on children's fight scenes and all that stuff, like the underground shit that Aegon's doing. But I'm pretty sure that she is the one who's spying on what's going on.
Regardless of the specifics, but I do agree with you. I think it is the same person. She comes to Lady Massaria, and Massaria simply says, "Quite a night at the castle." And she says, "Yes, lady." So the implication being that Massaria is clearly paying her to spy on the happenings at the castle, and she's coming back to report to Lady Massaria.
Mm-hmm.
And then, last and certainly not least, we get to the final scene of this episode where King Viserys passes away. And this scene is so important. It's really a turning point in the series. I'm sure we will reference it many, many times. I have already gone back to rewatch it a couple of times just because the language that he uses and the phrasing is so important and really sets the foundation for a lot of Alicent's behavior in the next few episodes. So Viserys is in bed. He's obviously in agony. And Alicent is there tending to him, but he thinks that it's Rhaenyra. He doesn't know that's not Rhaenyra. Yep. And that's really the beginning of the end for them. If you'll recall previously, Rhaenyra was speaking to Viserys, asking him about Aegon during the Song of Ice and Fire. And so he says to Alicent, who he thinks is Rhaenyra, "I want you to know if I believe it to be true." Then he says, "Do you remember Aegon?" And Alicent is like, "Our son, Aegon?" Like she's even questioning, "Are you talking about our son?" And Viserys just kind of talks over Alicent. He doesn't respond to her directly. And he says, "His dream, the Song of Ice and Fire. It was true what he saw. The prince that was promised to unite the realm. It is you. You must do this." So you have to imagine from Alicent's perspective, she's hearing this. She knows that Viserys is pretty much on his deathbed, right? I don't necessarily know if she knows he's going to die that night, but it's very close to the end for him. And she's thinking that Viserys is on his deathbed, and this is his last and final wish, that he wants Aegon, his son, to ascend the throne. He was the prince that was promised, and that it's him who will unite the realm. And especially, I think, that last part where he says, "You must do this," I think Alicent really takes that to heart because you have to remember, she's had, 3-4 kids with Viserys. They've been married for a really long time. I do think she loves and cares about Viserys, and she has other motivations as well. But I do think she does want to try to honor what Viserys' final words are. And so I think the phrase, "you must do this," she takes it as a personal mission from Viserys that she must be the one to ensure that Aegon is placed on the throne, and thus sets into motion all the events that transpire after this.
Yeah, I'm surprised that she didn't have more confusion, though. I mean, I totally understand why she interpreted it the way that she did, but I'm like, you didn't think it was weird that he's talking about a dream and this incoming war with ice and the cold and winter and all that stuff, and you never thought to be like, is Viserys talking about reality? All you heard was Aegon and it is you. You have to do this. And she took it and ran with that, which that's probably a little bit of a harsh interpretation for Alicent. But there's a little bit of that situation where you kind of hear what you want to hear. You know how that's just like a general human situation where whatever you're clouded by your
Yes.
own wants, desires, etc. It's like confirmation bias.
Yes. Yes. You took the words literally right out of my mouth. That's what I think she heard what she wanted to hear. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then Viserys passes away, so he is no more, which I'm really sad because I really thought the actor did a great job. And I thought he brought a good chemistry to the cast. And so I'm really sad that he's not going to be in it anymore because I really like him.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's dead. He's gone.
Patty
That's it.
Constantine.
Yeah,
No
he's
more.
great. He's really great. No more.
Although I thought it was really symbolic when he's fading out. And I don't remember his exact lines, but you can tell that he saw Aema in his final, just as
He says, my love.
My love.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. And I was like,
yes. You know, I got emotional a couple of times in this scene. The only other time I got this emotional was when Lena died. So I was
yeah,
a little caught off guard by that. I was not expecting to feel so heartbroken. Well, that's it, guys. That's it for the episode 8.
But we're not done yet because now we have to do the fantasy court of law.
Ooh.
As promised, today is day 9 of our trial. And I don't think we have a ton of evidence to add, but we have a couple points. My only changes really for Team Green, I would say, are that Viserys' confirmation was a huge, well, to her, at least her interpretation of that, right? It's like she believes that Viserys was talking to her, so she feels confirmed in putting Aegon on the throne now, and will pursue that with conviction because she thinks that is what Viserys wanted. But aside from that, I really don't have a lot to add for Team Green. Did you have anything else to add for them?
I did. Yeah, I actually did. I had a couple. Not a ton. But it is revealed in this episode that Aegon and Helena are wed. They're husband and wife now. And also that they have children. We don't know the specifics.
That's right.
It's sort of a brief interaction, but we're able to take that information from that scene with Helena, which means that they have heirs post Aegon. And we've talked about this so many times. When there are no heirs, everyone gets edgy and weird. And so it looks good for Team Green to have Aegon, young, healthy boy. And he has a wife who they've had, I believe that she says children, the implication being there's more than one, but at bare minimum, they have at least one child. So looks good for them, right? The second thing is they have essentially been ruling in Viserys' stead for the last several years. And I feel that this has given them the time they need to build influence and support for Aegon's claim in Westeros and specifically in King's Landing. And this is evident in the changing of the small council members. They've basically replaced almost all of the members except for Lord Beesbury. I think he's pretty much the only OG. And all of the small council members, Jason Lannister, the other dark hair guy with the curly hair, it's pretty obvious they're all playing ball for Team Green, right? And this is also evident as well with all the changing of the decor of the castle. They basically have slowly eradicated all the Targaryen stuff and have replaced it with the religious stuff. But to me, that implies that they've slowly chipped away at the Targaryen hold and influence and presence in King's Landing specifically. And so that to me implies that they are gaining a little bit of traction in making people feel comfortable with the idea of Aegon taking over instead of Rhaenyra.
It's been a very slow, silent insurrection almost. I don't want to say insurrection, but they've really instigated it over a long kind of bit by bit scenario. So nothing happened very drastically in a short period of time. So no one really noticed, I don't think, that how much change had really been implemented by them.
Yeah, agreed. And then for Team Black, I had a few things. The first is Jace and Luke are betrothed to Baela and Rhaena now. This is a great match for them. They are strong houses with assets and resources, and it really shores up the alliance between Driftmark and Team Black. And we know Driftmark has dragons, and they also have a naval fleet. So that's going to be really important for Team Black. Secondly, this is a big one. I think, Lorraine, you and I are probably going to agree on this quite a bit. Viserys' actions and words in the big throne room scene are pretty indicative of his continued commitment and dedication to Rhaenyra's succession. And the fact that he did it so publicly solidifies it even more. And then I broke it down in 3 different points because there's 3 specific instances that I feel highlight this sentiment. The first is when he first comes in, he says he's confused while we're hearing petitions for a succession that is already set, right? Again, strongly implying that the only reason that there's even debate about this is because Daemon is publicly announcing that Rhaenyra's children are bastards and therefore shouldn't have a claim. So the fact that Viserys is very dismissive of this idea implies again that he either doesn't care or he doesn't know, and that he's still supporting that Rhaenyra's children are legitimate, as is Rhaenyra.
Mm-hmm.
The second is when Daemon screams that they're bastards and calls Rhaenyra a whore. He says, "I will have your tongue for those treasonous words." So again, he is not okay with anyone saying that. And I mean, he even whipped out his knife like he was going to do it himself. I was like, you go, Viserys, about damn time.
Yes.
And then last, in the final scene before he dies, he says to Alicent, but thinking it's Rhaenyra, he says, "To unite the realm, it is you. You must do this." Now, the problem with this, it's not a super strong argument for Team Black in the sense of people in Westeros. It's really only an argument for us as viewers because it's said privately and it's clearly misinterpreted by Alicent. So it doesn't really help Team Black's case in the show, but it is important for us as viewers to know when we have the conversation about Team Black versus Team Green.
Right. In addition, for Team Black, I also had the fact that Syrax had 3 more eggs, which will obviously go to Team Black. And then Rhaenyra and Daemon have also had 2 sons together thus far, Aegon and Viserys.
Oh, that's true.
So they have additional heirs who are not contested. There's no one who's going to argue about the legitimacy of their sons, at least.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to favorite moments. I just had 2 moments. My first one that I really liked was the throne room scene with the Daemon where Viserys says, "I'll have your tongue," and then Daemon cuts off Daemon's head. And then he just says, "He can keep his tongue." And I was like, yes. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And then my other favorite scene was Helena's little line at the dinner where she's like, "It isn't so bad. He mostly ignores you, except sometimes when he's drunk." I'm like,
something to look forward to when you get married. Yay.
Oh, so nice. I know it offered comedic relief, but also simultaneously you're like, all right, I'm not going to think too much about that because then it gets really dark. So
yeah, it really does. Oh my gosh. Yes, you're so right. So for me, I actually had a lot of favorite moments. So it was really hard for me to pare it down. So I'll try to say them quickly. I love when Jace is practicing Old Valyrian in the Great Hall and that he's trying so hard. And then Rhaenyra tells him that she doesn't expect him to learn it in a day. And she makes a joke about the idea that, well, if you're really that concerned about the timeline, you would have to supplant your own mother and put yourself on the throne. But he's just so diligent about it. And I don't know. I think it makes him a good candidate for the throne. And then I really grew to like Rhaenys quite a bit in this episode when she speaks in the throne room during the petition scene. Really all of Rhaenys' scenes. She's just so elegant and strong, and you do not want to mess with her. And it's a little bittersweet because you realize she would have made an excellent queen. I think she really would have.
Yeah.
And then really the Daemon in the throne room scene, really all of his scenes, actually. When you think about it, he's basically only in this one episode. He's very briefly in like 2 others, but this is really his time to shine. And the actor plays the character so passionately, and he really leaves an impact, right? And I just thought the actor did an incredible job in the way he delivered his lines and everything. And it's just very, very memorable for me. And then my very most favorite part, I know I said this earlier, but I have to say it again, is when Shadow Daddy Daemon helps Viserys to the throne and puts the crown on his head.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I know. There's just something about that is so moving. So yeah, those are my favorite parts.
All right. That is all that we have for you guys today. Thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of the Book Down Fantasy Podcast. As always, we would love to hear your thoughts. So if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, or share it with your friends. And if you would like to keep up with us on other platforms, you can find our socials linked below in the episode description. We will see you guys next week. Stay nerdy, everyone. Bye.
Bye. He, oh my gosh.
Alicent in The Servant Girl.
The Servant Girl. I really thought you said Serpent Girl, and I was like, huh? Servant
He's
girl.
a
Yes.
slithery mice.
Slithery. Let me just say, shout out. Let me just say, shout out to Daemon. I can't even say it now.
I feel like there's funny memes about parenthood being kind of a cult because everybody's like, have kids, it's really great. But then once you have kids and it's really great, then everyone's like,
they're like, welcome to hell.
Yeah.
As we know, Jace and Luke are betrothed to Jace and Lena. Jace. Wait.
Jace and Luke.
Jace and Luke are
Rhaena
betrothed
and
to.
Bela.
Yes. Okay. And for this belief,